So welcome everybody to our final event of the day, a parallel session. And this session is going to be our workshop on mapping wildfire exposure data hosted by PHEER, the Public Health Extreme Events Research Network, and RAPID, which is the Natural Hazard and Disaster Reconnaissance Facility. So on the PHEER side, we're joined by Dr. David Abramson, who's a clinical professor at NYU's School of Global Public Health and the director of the research program on population impact, recovery, and resilience. And his research employs a social ecological framework to examine the health consequences of disasters, individual and community resilience, and long-term recovery from acute collective stressors. On the RAPID side, we have Dr. Joseph Wartman, who directs RAPID, which is headquartered at the University of Washington, where he's a professor of civil and environmental engineering, and he specializes in geological hazards with a specific interest in landslides and their impacts on communities. And over the past 2 decades, he's investigated and analyzed major geologic hazard events worldwide, including earthquakes, hurricanes, and landslides. Very happy. Oh, and Jaqueline, I believe, is also on and will I think is gonna play a role in the session. And I believe Jaqueline, I'm gonna get the pronunciation wrong here. Is it Zdebski? Somebody tell me if I'm totally wrong. Is an exposures and health team lead at RAPID and a research scientist in the civil and environmental engineering department at University of Washington. So thanks to all of our hosts. Looking forward to the session. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, but I did want to mention for those attendees coming from other sessions that this session, because it's a workshop, is going to allow you to both unmute and either have your camera on or off. So just make sure if you don't want to be on camera or unmuted that you make sure your camera is off and you are muted. The speakers have said that they'd be willing to take some questions verbally. So if you do have questions, they said that they'd be willing to take them sort of as we go along, and you guys can unmute yourself and ask. So I'm now going to hand it over to you guys. Please feel free to take it away, and thanks so much again.
Great. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thanks to everybody for inviting us to present to you today. I'm going to be fairly quick in my portion to talk about PHEER, maybe about 15 minutes or so. And when I'm done, I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions and then turn it over to Joe and to Jack and let them handle the lion's share of it. So with that, let me share my screen. Okay, are you guys able to see that?
Looks good.
Excellent. So right at the start, what I'm going to do is explain a little bit about what PHEER is, Public Health Extreme Events Research Network. This is an organic sort of bottom-up network that is run by 4 co-directors at 4 academic centers, University of Washington, UCLA, University of Delaware, and NYU. We've got a network of over 360 disaster scientists around the country. Most of them are hazard and disaster researchers as their primary focus. A handful of them are situational disaster researchers, meaning they tend to be activated by local hazards when they occur. About a quarter of our network sort of split their disciplinary focus on disasters and other issue areas. And about a quarter are new researchers, postdocs, PhD students, early career researchers. The concept behind PHEER is that it's a researcher-led network that can mobilize rapidly, inform evolving disaster research agendas, and advance the field. We received seed funding a couple of years ago from CDC via NSF. And at the moment, we are more of a voluntary research network. We are part of a much broader research ecosystem that a number of you may be familiar with, which is under the umbrella of Converge. And there are 7 extreme event research or reconnaissance networks, of which PHEER is one of them. Each one of these is disciplinary specific. So you would see, for example, GEAR is the geotechnical extreme events network, SEER is social science, etc. In addition to these extreme event research networks, we are supported by several powerhouse entities, including Joe's Rapid Facility, which you're going to hear about. In terms of our activities over the last couple of years, we really began with essentially setting up our operations, how we would deploy ourselves. So we created a concept of operations. We started recruiting members into the network. And then not long after that, the Maui wildfire was the first event that we mobilized around with a virtual reconnaissance. So we'll talk about that briefly. Let's sort of move forward a couple of years, and then we had a series of mobilizations. In 2024, we mobilized to the 3 major hurricanes that struck the continental US, Beryl, Helene, and Milton. In each one of them, as you'll hear, we ended up using an approach predicated on evaluating or using location-based data as a virtual reconnaissance. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about our efforts around the LA wildfires. For each one of these major events, we essentially apply a go, no-go decision-making process in order to determine whether or not the event is sufficiently useful to us to deploy the network. Does it exceed conventional preparedness and planning efforts? Is it something that is receiving national attention? Is it generalizable to other events? Is there a time criticality? Will the data contribute to a broader evidence base that could be used by public health emergency preparedness and response practitioners? Are there dual use opportunities to take what we do from a research perspective and use it for needs assessment as well? And are there, not even and, or are there specific stakeholders interested in research derived from the event? So all of these go into the decision making for us to deploy the PHEER network. So I'm going to very briefly touch on the Maui wildfires. Many of you are familiar with it. About a little under 100 people died as a direct cause of the wildfires. 86% of the households were damaged or destroyed. A little over half of the residents were displaced. And it was estimated to generate costs of over $5 billion. When we first thought about mobilizing, we decided to try and use this as a use case by creating a virtual data dashboard. We wanted to develop a process for identifying, collecting, analyzing, and sharing post-event secondary data. And we wanted to think about how this kind of data would support our own decision-making, and then how it would contribute to the field. And so essentially what we did is we looked at 3 different phases: at an immediate phase, at a short-term phase, and at a long-term phase. And in the immediate phase, we considered what sort of questions would we have in terms of who was exposed to the fire, how vulnerable were they, or what vulnerable populations were there patterns of exposure that interacted with the vulnerability, and then were there cascading exposures. We thought about what the data sources were, who the data owners were, and what the data access issues were. And with all of these, I'm not going to go through all of the details in these matrices. We were actively trying to obtain the secondary data in order to begin addressing some of these questions. So we did this for all 3 phases. And by the end of it, it was pretty obvious to us that, number one, it was not going to be simple, easy, or even feasible for us to get a number of the data sets that we needed or wanted in this amount of time within the very short time frames. So we began thinking about, okay, if we're going to have problems getting these kinds of data sets and getting the data use agreements in sort of rapid fashion to be able to use them with anywhere between from a week to several months after the event, would we be able to start identifying other data sets, novel data sets, cell phone data, credit card data, internet data, anything that we could use that could serve as proxies for these secondary data sets that we had been seeking? And similarly, could we develop some sort of a crowdsourcing approach to conduct some of these virtual reconnaissance? While we were thinking about this, or not long after that, the 3 hurricanes occurred, and we ended up setting up a task force from among our members to think about the use of location-based data, data predicated on mobile phones, social media, satellite data, and other sensing data as early signals of health vulnerability and system disruption and supply chain disruptions. We ended up identifying several research themes, such as whether we could use location-based data to illustrate system and supply chain disruptions, population movement, resource losses. We wondered whether this location-based data could serve as early warning signals of later health effects. And then we also began thinking about ways of visualizing the data. In the course of doing this, we tried essentially by seeding some pilot projects, and we seeded 5 different projects to begin doing some of these direct analyses using location-based data. That was during Hurricane Beryl. And then for Helene and Milton, we ended up crowdsourcing this, discarding the need to have the pilot projects, but instead posing a series of research tasks and seeing whether or not we could generate small teams that were organically drawn together to identify location-based data sources and begin to answer some of the questions that were of interest to us. This is not the primary focus of what I wanted to talk about today, but I wanted to sort of lead in to what we ended up doing in the LA wildfires to give you a bit of an understanding of how we try to look at novel data sources and sort of unique methodologies to accomplish these rapid reconnaissance and research efforts. So with the LA wildfires, what we ended up doing when we decided fairly quickly, by the way, that it passed the go, no-go decision-making tree where it was clearly something that was going to be of interest to us. So we decided to create an exposure map that would be freely available to the research, practice, and policy communities, as well as those residents that were directly affected by the wildfires. And we started out with this goal to develop a web-based geospatial platform to collect and curate exposure measures, since we knew that there would be a number of teams organizing themselves in that area. The LA wildfires were to some extent different than some of the other events we had looked at, whether it was Maui or the hurricanes, in that it is such a rich area for academics. There are so many different academic centers and experienced researchers there that we were imagining ourselves playing more of a coordinating role than we were a direct data collection role. That ended up changing a little bit with our partnership with Joe and the Rapid Facility. So initially, we looked to create this map by charting the research ecosystem and creating the map of who is doing what assessments where. And we were looking at all the different exposures as distinct data points that we could put onto a layerable and interactive map. So in the course of doing this, we ended up surveying mainly through the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, but then even beyond that, more directly, all of the different teams that were doing air, soil, water, biological data assessments And we started essentially keeping track of everything. And here you could see the overlapping Venn diagrams of those assessment studies that were either doing just a single exposure assessment medium, or who were doing multimedia assessments. And if you go to our website at PHEERnetwork.org, PHEER being PHEER, network.org, you'd be able to see and call up this exposure map. And essentially what we've done is we've layered a number of different elements onto it. And so we started out with a base map, and we decided to organize ourselves geographically around census blocks, since that would be, in our minds, the most useful, smallest, highest resolution area for conducting population health assessments. And we started adding the layers as we got them. And so what you're looking at here, for example, the green and the black and the red dots are coming from CAL FIRE, which is listing all of the damaged homes or undamaged homes or destroyed homes. And on top of that, we started adding purple air sensor data, water quality data, some of the data that we would get from colleagues that were doing this. Mainly what we were mapping, though, was ultimately what research teams were doing, what kind of assessments where. And we've been working with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health to essentially mirror some of the work that they're doing and their colleagues. They've got a really robust assessment system, and to take on some of the tasks of mapping on their behalf. And at this point, I'm pretty sure our map is now being used as the sort of coordinating map for all of these studies. We created forms to collect data on the studies, and the researchers had multiple ways that they could add their study to the database, either by describing it, giving us a file, or drawing a polygon of where they plan to collect the data. While we were doing this, we began discussions with Joe and his team, which you're going to hear about, to collect hyperspectral data. And in this situation, now we were going to be in the business of, in partnership with the RAPID facility, collecting primary data using hyperspectral imagery. So Joe's team, and Jack in particular, were flying the drones, and I'm sure they're going to describe this in much greater detail and with greater precision, about 100, 150 feet above ground level, and they were taking series of images at a 2-centimeter resolution in 25 sampled census blocks in the 2 fire regions, one in the Altadena fire region and one in the Pacific Palisades region. This is an enormous amount of data, and what they've done is they've been digitally processing the data. And while they've been doing that, we've reached out to the research community to find, we had a call for a Rapid Research Award for researchers willing and interested in working with this hyperspectral data. And we recently made the award, or are in the process of making the award, to Derek Manheim and Chris Isaacson of Cal Poly, who are engineers who happen to be associated with one of the other extreme event research networks, but who are very interested in this novel and sort of path-breaking data collection effort. And we sort of presented to these to the engineers, Derek and Chris, what our interests were. So the primary interest initially was to process the hyperspectral data set, to collect these, this data in terms of the pixels or the clusters that they're looking at, and associate very specific pollutants of interest. And we gave them a list of things such as arsenic, cadmium, lead, etc. So they're going to go through the data and begin to think about what is the right geographic unit of analysis to report on this incidence of toxins and pollutants and begin mapping it out. And then we will sort of turn our attention after that to a series of research questions that we had posed to them and that we'll do in collaboration with them, such as, are these toxins and contaminants more prevalent when they're in proximity to very significantly burned areas? Are there relationships between social vulnerability and the presence of toxins? Are they able to correlate a geographic relationship between these specific toxins and contaminants and the burned electric vehicles? And there was a lot of interest about understanding the prevalence of toxins and contaminants at areas where children generally congregate, such as schools, playgrounds, and green spaces. And sort of true to our mission, what our plan is that when they are done with this and they've sort of assembled all of the data, we're going to make the data available as a final curated data set through Design Safe. So that's our game plan. I'm going to stop the sharing, open up for any questions that that people have, and then I will end up turning it over to Joe. And if there are no questions, that's fine. There's more time for Joe and his team, and he could probably answer the questions equally as well, if not better. So Joe, let me turn it over to you.
David, looks like there's one question for you.
Hi, this is Ashlyn Quinn. Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out how to do all this, and it looks like my camera's over here. So, and you're over there. So anyway, really fascinating work. First of all, like just the idea that you have a 2-centimeter resolution is like mind-boggling. I mean, I'm just much more used to hearing about resolutions of, 18 kilometers or something like that. So, kudos on having that data available, which I'm sure is going to be able to answer so many really interesting questions. My question actually had to do with kind of the work you were presenting a little bit earlier about the location-based tracking. I think that's really fascinating and could provide, as you suggested, a really novel data source for looking at exposures in the wake of these extreme events. But also, I was thinking about how a lot of times the services that you would use to track people's location is often disrupted, right, as a result of the event. So things like cell phone networks, electricity grids, and that sort of thing that you would need, right, to conduct that location-based tracking would be disrupted exactly at the time when maybe you'd want to use it the most. So I was just curious whether you'd run into that issue and what your thoughts are about overcoming that limitation.
Right. Thanks, Ashlyn. That definitely is something that we had thought about, and I think it would really depend on which sensing data source we would use. And so if we knew that we were in a situation where there might have been electricity outages, we would use satellite data to look at nighttime lights and use that as an initial proxy for electrical outages. A lot of what we ended up doing with the 3 hurricanes worth of location-based data were built around probably several weeks to maybe 2 months after the events. But we're also looking a lot at mobility data, cell phone data, point of interest data, and we were beginning to see pretty quickly patterns emerging of being able to track how quickly populations recover in terms of returning to baseline activity. And that was, we were able to do that even with electrical outages because cell phone networks were still up and running.
That's great. Thanks.
So I don't want to take any more time away from Joe. So Joe, please take it away.
Just a couple of quick words about the RAPID facility. We exist to support your science. In particular, the RAPID facility enables transformative research by providing you, the investigation team, the research community with the instrumentation, software, and support needed to capture, analyze, and to archive perishable data from natural hazard events and from disasters. We have a wide range of instruments. We have over 300 instruments in our portfolio. We engage in a wide range of other activities related to support our mission, including training. We have a flagship training event that takes place here every summer, and we do a lot of one-on-one training, and we do small group training as well. I am going to focus on just stepping through a couple of my slides as a preview, but I have we have a range of drone systems. We also have a range of street view systems, as well as a new portfolio of environmental health instrumentation, and that is all available to you as the research community. We're going to largely focus on the first of those two. We're going to talk about our drone sensors and instruments today, along with our street view imagery. As you know, the Los Angeles fires occurred in January 2025. There were two areas that are impacted, the Eaton fire area and the Palisades, and we've collected data from both of those. And once the slides are running, I'm going to show you the footprint of our data collection. I'm going to say that we did not collect data over the entire footprint. We really focused on imaging areas that intersected, where fires intersected with human populations, with social systems, and with the built environment. And that is to say, we didn't necessarily use our time resources to image the natural environment, the surrounding terrain, and so forth, which would be of interest for geological engineering and so forth. There's a couple things about the data set I want to tell you that make it unique. It's ultra high resolution. We have collected 2 centimeter pixel resolution data across multiple square kilometers. The data is quite comprehensive and it's linked. So we have orthomosaics. And again, I'm going to show you examples of this, I hope, in the workshop today. We also have digital surface models, which are essentially 3-dimensional models. And we also have street view imagery from across the area. And these are all geo-referenced, so we can put those all together and we can use, for example, street view by itself, or we can use it in conjunction with the orthomosaic imagery. Orthomosaic imagery is essentially just looking down. Okay, looks like our slides are running. So I'm going to let you skip the intro slide. I'm just going to, if you go to the second slide, this is who we are. I talked a little bit about our mission, and these slides will be available. I can make these available for reference as well, and I know the session's being recorded. So if you go to the next slide, just say that we are going to, we have air and aerosol sampling devices. We have water and soil sampling devices, remote sensing platforms that either operate from the ground or from drones. I'm going to skip through those slides so we can really get to the data set, but those are available in the slide deck for you to all review, just as a quick preview of what we have. And once that downloads, I'm going to show you the footprint of our data collection. A couple things that are unique about this, the data set is that it's ultra high resolution across multiple square kilometers. It's linked, as I said, everything is geospatially coordinated. The timing occurred in February and March of 2025, so it really includes the immediate effects after the fire, and it's all openly available, as I'm going to describe for you. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, this is now the correct one. So if we skip through just the first couple slides, maybe go to slide number 5. Next slide is number 4 and number 5. This shows the 2 fire areas, and then I'm just going to let you go to the next slide, which is number 6. And this slide is going to zoom into the Eaton fire area. A couple of the things I highlighted about what make the data set unique. Again, this indicates the fire footprint is shown in red, and what I've shown in white are our individual drone flights that we compiled into a single orthomosaic mapping, with the point being that our focus, again, really was the way we spent our time was on flying on areas where we had the fire impacting a human population. Let's you go to the next slide. This is our mobilization with instruments. This is a photograph that Jaqueline, who led our field effort, took when she was packing. This is an event we drove to. Often we fly to the events. We brought enough instrumentation that it was a little bit easier for us to bring kind of a mobile command center. We used fixed wing drone aircraft, which is shown in the upper middle. We also used traditional quadcopters, and those are for the heavy lift platforms. In particular, our hyperspectral cameras mounted to that. The lower right is our street view imaging system. We have GPS control, which is shown on the bottom, and all of this was done under health and safety protocols, obviously, reflecting the fire that had just occurred. I'll let you go to the next slide, which is a couple photos that I took during some in-person training we did at UCLA. We were supporting a UCLA-based team, and so we trained a number of graduate students immediately before our deployment on how to operate these instruments. So we took them out, did field training, and then ultimately turned many of the instruments over to those students who would, for example, be doing some of the street view imagery drives. Let you go to the next slide. So I'm just going to show you one, which is a tiny fraction of a percent of the kind of imagery that we've acquired, but to show you what you can see in these images. This is an example of one of the orthomosaic single zoomed in image. And if you go to the next slide, I'm going to kind of go through a list of what you can actually see in this image. So you can see the structural remains of building, and in particular, you can see the level of combustion. You can see surviving structures. You can see the delineation between the burned and unburned area, that is the fire perimeter. Let's you go with one more. You can see the post-fire ground conditions, the amount of debris that's been produced, and you can locate the cars as well. You can also identify EVs, which were spray painted by firefighting forces on the ground. So if you wanted to map those out. If we go to the next slide, we also have oblique versions of this imagery, which is more intuitive and three-dimensional. And then what's shown in this slide, we skipped ahead one. If we just go ahead one more slide, is a three-dimensional model. These are our point cloud models. These are the models that enable us to take three-dimensional measurements. So this is not a photo. These are actual points that are colorized that we can then begin to back out things like debris, volumes, and so forth. Go to the next slide. All of this data is available on DesignSafe, and I'm going to provide you with a data brief that's going to provide kind of easy to access information for this. And then within DesignSafe, all of this data using an application called HazMapper. I'm going to let you go to the next slide, and at the bottom of that slide is going to be a video link. And so if you could just play this video, and I'll kind of narrate through what we're going to watch. Thank you so much for handling the video footage here. So what I've done here is I've clicked on the data set within DesignSafe. Again, I'll provide you with the address. I'm just zooming into the Palisades here. All of these boxes are the areas where we have the high resolution orthomosaic imagery. And so what we're doing here in this HazMapper application is we're just viewing. We're not downloading any information. These are all heavy lift data sets, but they're easy to find and access without, and it's all entirely based in the cloud. Here I'm just moving over to the Eaton Fire area. Because the data set is so large, we subdivided this into segments. And if you click upon the cloud, as I've just demonstrated here, you're going to see our PHEER viewer, and PHEER viewer enables you to look at a three-dimensional view of the model. So these are, in a sense, our digital surface models, a different product from those orthomosaic mappings. And there's a lot you can do. You can take direct engineering measurements. You can estimate volumes. You can look at, for example, I can see here the condition of utilities, whether those utility lines have burned down, locations of pools, cars, and so forth. And so again, this is all like very visually intuitive, three-dimensional models that have resolution on the order of several centimeters for taking those kinds of measurements. Let's just skip to the next slide, which is going to show our street view one of our Street View images. So it's one more slide after this. Thanks. So this is our Street View imagery. We use a mapillary interface, which automatically does facial blurring and also anonymizes license plates. This is just one of those scenes, but if you step to the next slide and also play this video, I'm going to show you what you can do with these data sets. We acquired Street View in the immediate aftermath of the event, and then we returned several months ago. So we have about a 7-month after data set. And so again, this is all happening within the mapillary interface. This was the post-fire data set that we collected. I'm just going to kind of spin around 360 degrees from just a single location. We have in excess of 100 kilometers of this kind of Street View imagery through the impacted area. And then what I'm going to do is use the time viewer to go back and forth between what we saw just a couple months ago, obviously an indication of resilience and recovery at these exact scenes from our second Street View campaign. So this is longitudinal data, and this is a tool to be able to compare that longitudinal data. We also have longitudinal data for the orthomosaics as well. So again, you can kind of go back and make post-fire and after-fire data comparisons. And then, of course, this can also be linked to Google Street View as well, so you can look at the pre-fire imagery. I'll let you go to the next slide here. We also have multispectral imagery. I'm going to say that this is a way of seeing beyond our visible wavelengths. There's a lot you can see here with vegetation health, different land use classes. If you go to the next slide, there's also indices that can be used to look at burn severity through the multispectral images. And then I'm going to let you go through one more slide. And as David mentioned, we've collected hyperspectral imagery. This is just a quick preview. This is even more focused in a sense than the multispectral images that enable us to start to pull out things like chemical constituents and so forth in the debris that remains. You go one more slide ahead. Data to information. So I've been showing you raw data. We have been working with our machine learning team here to make very nuanced classification of different levels of combustion at each of the tens of thousands of buildings that have been impacted. And these different colors are associated with, again, different levels of combustion, indicating what was released into the air, water, and soil. If you go one more slide ahead. And then we're able to scale this. And so we can do this over the entire fire area where we have that high resolution imagery. And so this is the Pacific Palisades. I'm going to let you go one more slide ahead. All of this information is available for easy download. We have a data brief, and I'll tell you how to get to that, but I'm just going to take you through a quick tour. It tells you what about the basic data set description, what makes the data set unique, what are the principal products. The second page talks about how to access the data, and then some suggested uses of the data. If you go to the next slide, we also have a sample of the data that's shown here, a number of frequently asked questions, and then everything that I've mentioned here is accessible through a simple hyperlink. And so you can access this data brief either using the QR code. The easiest way to find it is to go to our website, and I'm going to point you to that in just a moment, and go to our updates section. If you click on updates, this data brief will download, again, with all of those hyperlinks. And let me also say that you don't need to log in to download any of this data. It's openly available for anyone to peruse and use at their discretion. Next slide is how to find us at the Rapid Facility. Our address is uwrapid.org. You can use this QR code. You can Google UW Rapid. And I've encircled that update section of our landing page. If you click on that, you'll find our data brief. So thank you so much for dealing with some of the technical difficulties, and I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
I just had a quick question. This is amazing. Such a cool resource. I had no idea anything like this was available. I'm curious if you, with these super high resolution and 3-dimensional, in some cases, images, if you run into any pushback from like communities about privacy concerns with things that are images that are that high resolution.
Yeah, it's a good question. We have run symposia at, at national meetings on just this topic and sort of the ethics of these images and Street View and so forth. Let me just say first off, like from a legal perspective, we are acquiring. We do not enter private property. We're flying in legal airspace. Everything that we acquire with Street View is acquired from public rights of way and so forth. And actually, the answer is no. Nobody has asked us. You can request blurring, I know, within like Google Street View and so forth. No one has ever made a similar request to us. I think it gets a bit tricky when you begin to look at like human behavior and Street View images. We're not doing that. In fact, this area is almost entirely devoid largely of people, except for our return visit when you see some crews working with issues like implied consent. But there really hasn't been that level of concern about that, like that, again, that level of resolution and what you can see. So not as of yet. I could understand if you have a property that's contaminated and it's revealed through those images that there's a potential associated loss of the value of that property. Right. There's also kind of I think interest in understanding where these potential pollution or toxin hotspots are as well. And we're one of many, similar data sources that cover this area. So, but anyway, quick answer to your question, Rachel, is that we have not. No one has thus far expressed that kind of concern. And we have acquired, like at this point, thousands of miles of Street View imagery, lots and lots of this high resolution ortho mosaic imagery after hurricanes and other kind of disaster events. It's generally been welcomed by the community. When the feedback we've gotten are people who have things like second houses in Florida who have not been able to access this, or people who have evacuated and been able to get a look at what are the impacts without having to go back and visit.
Right. Yeah, no, I can imagine definitely on net. It is seems like it would be a positive for communities, but I just wondered if you'd encountered that before. Super cool.